Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Sean Weed, along with Nick Gosnell here from WIBW News Now.com, and of course streaming here on Facebook Live here with Governor Sam Brownback, where we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Sean.
And then also to the folks who are on Facebook. We are on Facebook Live, and folks, you are able to leave a comment and even ask some questions for the governor if you have them. Again, keep on topic, and please remember that we are appreciative of the governor's time. He's a very busy man, so let's keep everything respectful, and we will continue to answer those questions here on Facebook. And Governor, I'm going to let Nick Gosnell start us off this morning because he's got a slew of questions since he's a State House reporter.
Well, and we'll begin with maybe the biggest issue for the State House when everybody comes back in January, but you want to hear about it before then, and that is school funding. We're down to the last year of the block grants, and so we need to figure out what's next.
And that's a discussion we need to start having right now. I tried to get the legislature to really engage on it this past year. What should be in a new school funding system? Because we had a lot of problems with the old system. We were paying for $50,000 pianos while teachers weren't getting the things that they need in the classroom because you had a system where you could spend capital money, but you couldn't move it to other places. So what we're wanting to do is to get people thinking and talking and putting in ideas now about what should be in a new school funding system. And I hope people will start to comment about that. I hope people will start putting those ideas forward. We're going to be out starting to collect on those, and it's time to do it. We haven't done an overhaul of the school funding system in Kansas since I think roughly 1992. And it's past time to make sure that we're getting money into the classroom, that money is being effectively used. We're not putting it in administration or facilities that are not as high a priority as paying for teachers.
Well, and we can't leave the school funding issue without at least mentioning the fact that the oral arguments for the adequacy portion of the Gannon case are coming before the Kansas Supreme Court next month. What are you hoping to see from that? Because obviously the legislature still has some work to do as well.
They do. School funding is up since I've been in office. It's up 8% from when I started. The state amount of money that we're putting into K-12, about a third of that is in the pension system upgrade. A lot of people say it's all into pensions. It didn't all go to pensions. But by the way, the pension system is at a record trust fund level now, so we've gotten it out of the bankruptcy zone, and it's now much healthier. So I just hope the court looks at those things and then also gives the process a chance to work. Let the legislature, whoever's elected this fall, come back in and design a new school funding system to hit the Rose test that they set up to make sure that we're providing adequate levels and areas of learning for students throughout the state of Kansas. And by the way, Kansas schools continue to have nice rankings with a number of entities that saying these are good public schools in the state of Kansas.
So then the question, I guess, that follows is whatever the court decides, how is that going to impact the potential retention election for some of those justices in November? Is it about school finance, or is it more than that?
I don't, people have to decide. This is certainly one of those election cycles where you're seeing a lot of people saying, look, I just want something different than what I've had. And you saw Donald Trump come through the Republican primary offering just a different vision and a different type. Will that hold true through to the fall? I don't know. But there's certainly that mood in the country overall that things are not going right, and we want to change the people in office throughout the system.
Well, let's dovetail then into Mr. Trump, as he named you to the ag portion of his campaign committee, and along with Senator Roberts and a couple of other guys from Kansas as well. What do you feel Mr. Trump needs to know about agriculture in general and specifically in Kansas that would help him or would help his opponent serve as president?
I think they need to know this is a vibrant industry. It is a globally competitive to globally dominant industry. It is one where you've got great farmers, a great a great enterprise that processes, that ships throughout the world. We beat the global competition. We're doing it environmentally effectively and saving the environment. We're doing it in a way that you can feed people at a very cost-effective point. I think he needs to recognize how much agriculture is a backbone of this nation and how good we are at it, and to not mess it up. I hope that we can really maintain the crop insurance system. That's the one where there is a substantial federal backing for crop insurance that really makes a lot of the whole finances of the system work. And then I think we've got great opportunities in Kansas for export growth in agriculture. Dairy, got a big dairy processing plant going up in Garden City that's much of it's focused on export. I think we can grow a lot in this industry and renewable fuels. And by the way, this is a sidebar. Thank goodness we've got ethanol plants throughout this country, and particularly through Kansas. If we didn't, with the corn crop that's coming on now, you'd be looking at corn maybe half of the price it is now. It's a 3-something a bushel. We're going to inundate this country with corn this year, and ethanol is taking a third. I'm pulling that a bit out of the air, but they're taking about a third of that crop. And if we didn't have that, we'd be dumping it all in the global market at maybe half the prices we are now.
So do you believe that that's a key to energy independence, that agriculture is a key to that, and how do those two tie together?
It absolutely is. And it's also a key to a renewable future. We want the country to be based, and I want Kansas to be the renewable state. We've had $10 billion of wind investment in this state. We've also had a sizable investment in ethanol that takes milo and corn in this state and makes it into fuel. And these are systems then where you have a circular system where you're producing the crop, you're gaining the CO2, you're pulling it out of the air to make the crop. It is released in burning, but at least you've got a system in place. And I think there's just great potential there. And then going on into diesel fuels out of corn products and soybean products as well.
Talking about the national landscape and also in the political landscape, we knew that you weren't the biggest fan of Mr. Trump going into before the convention, and now that he is the nominee for the Republican Party, he's also got Mr. Pence as his running mate, and we know that you guys are friends and you have a high admiration for him. But when it comes to the Trump campaign and his standpoint on a lot of things, are you still kind of a little weary of some of his policy and his plans, or are you, I hate to use these terms, but jumping on the bandwagon with all the other Republicans?
There's things I still disagree with him on policy, substantial disagreements. But those pale in comparison to my disagreements with Hillary Clinton, particularly on who she would appoint to the Supreme Court of the United States, which to me is much of the ball game, because most of the big issues anymore end up in front of the Supreme Court. So who you appoint on that Supreme Court, be they a strict constructionist with the Constitution or a living document, which is generally where the left goes. The Constitution's a living document. You can kind of interpret it and see in it what they want in it. That makes a huge difference. And then also just the fight against terrorism and radical Islamic militants that seek to kill people here and abroad. I mean, at least Mr. Trump will identify this as a problem. And you have real difficulties defeating something if you don't. Now, that's not to say that everybody, because it's not true, or there is even a large percentage of people that follow the Islamic faith are terrorists. They're not. And we've seen them globally. And we need to be aware of this to protect the people in the United States of America. And that's, both these issues get conflated. And you don't have the real discussion of the topic, which is we need to protect the American people. And that's the first and fundamental duty of the federal government.
You know, you've been on that stage running for president. You've been under the.
Not very effectively, but thank you.
But it's got to be one of the hardest things to ever do is to run for president. And sometimes we've heard that some politicians say things that they don't mean to, or that their policy doesn't completely jive with what the American people want. But with Mr. Trump, he's very outspoken. He doesn't hold back. Do you think that will help or hurt him in the upcoming general election?
It helped him in the primary. People were tired of political correctness. They were angry at the direction the country is going, and they wanted somebody plain spoken and to throw a wrench into the works. And they didn't like the Washington crowd, and Trump has run against all of that. He tapped his finger, put it on the right problem, which is security, and median family income in the United States has gone down the last 7 years. The average American is living poorer today than they did 7 years ago. This is a huge problem. And he's put his finger on the right two topics. It's just, the prescription for it is, I think you got to look at this and say, you've got to release the American public to grow, and you have to really get intensive on protecting the American people. And Hillary's not willing to do that. And Trump is moving on those topics, and hopefully I think we'll get moved in the right, and we'll move in the right direction.
Well, bringing it back to the state of Kansas, do you believe that for want of a better term, disaffected attitude that maybe propelled Mr. Trump was a little bit here in Kansas as well in the results of the primary and some of the statewide races?
Well, I think it was there. I think it's there. I think there's a number of factors. We had a terrible budget year this last year. It was terrible. You've had each month, other than one, we're missing the consensus revenue estimates, and I don't set the consensus revenue estimates. That's set by 3 economists from 3 universities, Legislative Research and Department of Revenue, budget director. They're the ones that set it, but every month it's off. And we have, a huge fall off in oil and gas prices. We have a huge fall off in agricultural income, 2 of the legs of the Kansas economy. And we're still not building that many small jets, small planes. That's another leg of the Kansas economy. Now, the commercial products are doing well. Small business growth has been excellent. But, I think all of those together, and then just this continued issue being raised that the K-12 system has been cut. When that's, if you look at the state funding, now federal money's gone down. It's gone down a lot. But if you look at the state money going into K-12, today it's 8% higher than when I started office. And I think all of those go together, and other factors to create the landscape that you saw in this state in August.
So the question then is, it's the job of the legislature to appropriate whatever money's appropriated. But there was a law in the books that the legislature has, by necessity or by convention, whichever way you want to look at it, had to set aside over the last few years about having a 7.5% ending balance in the state coffers at the end of the year. Is that something that we should get back to, regardless of what method did you use, whether it's cutting government or raising taxes?
Either get back to it or get it removed as a statute. Do one of the two, because it hurts us if we don't hit it, and you've got it there as a target. And if you're not going to hit it, when I came into office the year before, the state ended with $876.05 in the bank account. This last year we had a terrible budget year. We ended with $41 million, which is still nowhere close to 7.5%. It's a lot better than $1,000. And our pension system is in much better shape today than it was before. And honestly, that's the one that can get you long term. You don't take care of your pension system. It is a big overhang on the state. Now we're in much better shape. But I think those are either comply with it and do it, or remove it from the books.
So which would you rather see the legislature do? Obviously, you can't tell them what to do, but what would be your preference?
I'd rather see us getting a much larger rainy day account built up. Now, having said that, we have neighboring states with rainy day account. And once you have a real fall off in these commodity markets and your state has a substantial commodity basis, those states have blown through those. Oklahoma had a big rainy day account, North Dakota, but with the fall in oil prices, they've still had to slash services just because it's not enough to make up for oil going from $90 a barrel to $25. Now it's bounced back up some lately, so that helps us. And cattle price, the cattle income has come back up some, which helps us.
What about when it comes to Medicaid? I know there's been a backlog with Medicaid. The reimbursement hasn't been there, or some folks are complaining that reimbursement hasn't been coming in like it should be. And I know that at some points you've actually had to delay for some of the reimbursements because of budgetary issues. What's going to be done to fix the Medicaid system here in Kansas?
We've got a couple of things going on. One is we've put extra people in place to be able to get that Medicaid sign-up down. We have been working down the wait list for some time, and they are lower now than when I started in office. We've had a wait list, unfortunately, for the expanded services, not the basic services, but expanded services, and that's not the right term. But we've been getting that down for some period of time. We'll keep working on it. And then I proposed, I said, let's up the amount of provider tax to the maximum amount that's allowed at the federal level, and use that to pull down more of the Medicaid resources so we don't have to do these Medicaid reductions that I proposed to meet the budget. I offered that at the end of this last legislative session. It's something we ought to do, and I wouldn't doubt that it's something that Congress allows, but I don't know if they're going to allow it in the future of you raising your provider tax to pull down more federal money. The other thing, Sean, and I don't think most people recognize this, is that since I've taken office, the Kansas share of Medicaid, our share has gone up because our economy and our finances have improved, to the point of it's costing us, this is roughly $200 million more to provide the same services today as a state than when I started in office. Because as our economy heals and gets better, the share we have to pay goes up and the federal share goes down. That's a heavy lug for us, but it's what you want because your economy and your situation, your financial situation is improving, but it's a heavy lug.
But as you look at the economy of Kansas, the unemployment numbers that came out this past week are not encouraging in terms of private sector jobs, because that number actually went down this past month. But how do you respond to those who say that your administration has called private sector jobs one of the most important economic indicators, and yet they're down? Is it just about kids going back to school, or what's been the reason that you can see why we are where we are in terms of losing those jobs, at least over the last month or so?
Well, I hope they look at the full record, Nick, because we have hit a record of private sector job growth. We were at a 16-year low in unemployment, and that goes back through all of the Sebelius years, where you had a really strong economy and higher unemployment rates than we hit at 3.8%, which 3.8% in some cases you're looking at, what we're short of is we're short of people. You need more people out in the job market. And then we've been pushing people to get in the job market through our welfare program, that we're saying if you're able-bodied without dependents, you need to apply for work or take job training, and that has grown our workforce, so our workforce participation rate is higher. I welcome a debate about private sector job growth in this state, because you look at the total record we've had, and then the record number of small businesses forming in the state. And the final thing, too, here is, remember, it is really important for us long-term to win the battle for Kansas City. Because Kansas City is a key growth area for us as a state long-term. It's a place where we can catch a lot of millennials where, they'll say, hey, look, I want to move to this area, that's an interesting area. Kansas City, we can do that. And not that we can't in other areas, because we can, but it's a natural. And we are seeing great growth, and we're seeing us winning the battle in Kansas City. First time in 18 years, in 2014, we saw taxpayers move from Missouri to Kansas. The prior 18 years in a row, we saw wealth of taxpayer funding or taxpayer filings move from Kansas to Missouri. In 2014, for the first time in 4 years, we saw net in-migration in Kansas, most of that out of Missouri. The things that we're doing are working. They do take time. The data lags. This is 2014 data. But we've got to keep doing this, and we've got to continue really winning the battle for Kansas City.
What's next? I mean, for the states, coming up in the legislative session, we still have a little ways to go. But what some of the things you focus on, as you said earlier, you want to talk, you want to hear from the people about school funding. How do they go about doing that? I think that would be one of the main questions. If you want, when it comes to school funding, the block grant program going away, how do the people make their voices heard? Because some of the questions in regards to, while we're on Facebook Live here, are about school funding. So how do people make their voices heard?
We're going to be announcing a process for that here in the next couple of weeks for people to be able to do that. As well, they can start talking to their legislative candidates. All these legislators are going to be involved in writing a new school funding system, and they ought to be out talking with these legislative candidates about what do you want to see in this? Because I think everybody agrees that we want to get more money into the classroom. Or maybe not everybody, but most people agree that that's the case. What does that look like then? Why did we not get 2/3 of the money into the classroom under the old system? What was the problem with this? And I would hope people would, there's for sure a place that folks ought to start speaking into the legislative candidates, and then we'll announce a system here in the next couple of weeks.
One of the other comments, some of the other comments that we were hearing from folks is there are a lot of small businesses out there, and the reason is because there are no regular jobs. So folks are having to create their own businesses. And mind you, just going off of what folks are saying, a lot of the problems some folks are seeing is that these companies, larger companies like maybe Kroger, Dillon's, Quick Shop, are bringing people in at minimum wage. So the salaries just aren't there to keep people here. There may be jobs, but the salary does not go with the jobs that are here. What is your response to that?
You know, it's a dynamic market, and what we try to do is to continue to grow the number of opportunities. So Amazon worked hard to bring them into the region, into the state, and they're going to create well over 2,000 jobs. But you also get big companies move out on you. It's also why we focus so much on small business, because generally small business is homegrown and stays with you. And there is also a lot of failure rate that goes with small business. There's a churn with that. So there has to be a constant growth in the numbers because there's a loss. Unfortunately, nationwide, we're losing far more small businesses than we're gaining, but in Kansas, that trend is the other way. We're gaining small businesses. So it's a dynamic situation. What I see is the more we can grow jobs and opportunities here, the more there'll be competition for people to work. And then your labor rates can go up and do go up. And that's what I hope we continue to create. And we're seeing that in the numbers, some of those wage numbers going up. And we want to continue to see that taking place.
In December, the president's guidelines on overtime rules coming up in December, that takes place, that actually goes into effect. Do you think that's going to hurt or help the Kansas job outlook?
You got a number of people really concerned about what that's going to do on job growth. And I think they're just, you need government regulation, but you also need a very dynamic market creating jobs and opportunities. That's your best way to long-term sustainably grow your wage rate, is to have a dynamic competition, growth in your private sector labor market. If it's in the public sector, and the public sector does a lot of good, but you got to pay taxes to do that. And then you have to raise taxes, and then you generally chase off businesses that are going, well, I can pay less taxes in Texas or somewhere else. So you've really got, you want that dynamic growth in the private sector market. You want it large and small. I personally think that you want it mostly small, because that's where 70% of the people work, and they generally stay with you instead of moving out of state.
We've only got time for one more question, Nick.
Well, the Department of Administration has been working on some regulations that are designed to help change the process in how some state employees deal with their evaluations and so on. Opponents, including a gal from the state employee union, are wondering if that has something to do with the potential budget cut that could come if you continue to miss revenue estimates, if layoffs might be coming. How do you respond to that?
That's not true. There is no plan to do some sort of major state employee layoff. We have been in tight budgets. We are carefully screening any additions in a number of areas. There are places where we've got job openings that we are seeking a number of employees, particularly in our state hospitals, generally in our corrections system. We just hired the biggest class, we got the biggest class we've ever had going through Kansas Highway Patrol. So about December when they get out, people better not be speeding, because there's going to be a number of increased highway patrol. But these ladies and gentlemen do a fabulous job, and they do a lot more than just that. So no, there's no plan to do that. We're going to try to continue to manage our budget and manage it effectively, and getting over half of our budget into the K-12 system, which is where we're putting it.
All right, Governor Sam Brownback, thank you so much for your time. Really
Thanks, Sean.
appreciate it. And folks, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah.
We'll, of course, have this posted on our website, and you'll be able to watch it again and have more information, of course, on WIBWNewsNow.com. I'm Sean Wheat, along with Nick Gosnell and Governor Sam Brownback. Thank you so much. Have a great day.